when we show up in these spaces that have all this history and cultural context, it's pausing and being able to look at, where is my purpose and place in this? How much of this do I own? How much am I responsible for? And being very clear about it, because if you don't, you're more than likely to end up hitting some spaces that you could have paid attention to very differently with a different frame and lens. And so that's how I show up, is being very clear and aware of how I'm bringing the totality of me to those spaces, and recognizing all these other dynamics and variables that are at work at the same time. So it's complex.
I I have to tell you, when I heard you talking, the first thing, first of all, I'm just elated to be with my sister, Dr. Froswa. But when you started talking about the history of the state fair, I could feel my throat getting tight. I could feel my chest getting tight, not because that's new for me. I grew up in the American South, racial apartheid. That was de jure apartheid. It was happening everywhere else too, but certainly they put it on the books and in concrete there. So it's not like it was new. It was just that it felt, again, so heavy to me to think about from whence we come and continue to be in many ways. And what does that mean about purpose? And then you said something else that really, you said a lot, but the two things that, I'm like, my mind is grabbing right now. It's, you said showing up with purpose, and you talked about your little fluffy dog with the fluffy caboose, and and how she, or she,
Uh-huh.
yeah, how she sort of sizes things up. And when I think about showing up with purpose, one of the things that I am trying to do increasingly is look at the size of my caboose. I mean, what I mean by that is sort of look at what my body is doing
Yes.
when I show up. And when you talked about the totality, bringing the totality, I think where the challenge is right now, and where I'm really, really having to see, what am I doing? What am I bringing? I know the words I bring. I know the ethos I can espouse. I know all the right stuff, but what's my body doing? And if I don't pay attention to that, I know that something sideways can happen.
Yes.
And then the other thing you said, you were talking about how you are questioned, how you have been questioned on all sides about, what went on there, how, what are you, as if somehow you might be a traitor because you aren't limiting yourself. And you were saying, I can look and see where I belong, and I will move into that space with dignity. And it reminded me of a Nikki Giovanni poem, and I don't remember which one. And she said, I wanted to be a new person, but my rebirth was stifled not by the master, but by the slave. And
Mm.
so the piece of that I think about is how, and this is not like finger pointing blaming for me, this is how we all carry our wounds, and how if we don't act with purpose, we could well inflict our wounds on each other, on all of each other, irrespective of race, culture, ethnicity. And we've got to pay attention to what's going on. What am I doing here? What am I hoping for? How can I contribute?
But you said something that's so powerful that I don't think we do enough of, and it's reflection. I find that so often when we enter these spaces, we do not create the time to reflect. And there's something to be said about, when you look at scripture in the Bible, and it always talks about remembering. There is something so powerful in the memory and the reflection,
Mhm.
and processing the memory, because I don't think you can really heal adequately until
Mhm.
you have both of those at work. And I think as we're walking into these spaces, it's, I often tell my daughter, one of the challenges that we have as a society is this problem with either or. It always is this or this, and it's not. It is both and. So even as we're talking about this, there is this piece of, the external of people that are saying, why are you doing this? What's going on? And then there is this internal history that you have, that's a personal lived experience that you're going through, and the history of your ancestors. And so how do you make sure that in your remembering those things and reflecting, that you are using that as a tool to help you heal and to be able to deal with and interact in all these different spaces that we're in? You have got to be able to have that parallel universe of that both and of operating both in past, in present, and some ways using that to help dictate what future could be.
Absolutely. Now, if I grew up in the South, there were a whole lot of Bibles around me, right?
That folks didn't read.
That folk didn't read. But when you use the word remember, and that took me back to a class that one of my doctoral courses, it was really all about myth and metaphoric communication. And what this woman who was teaching the class reminded us of is just the purpose of remembering through cultures, through time, which is put yourself together. Put yourself together again. Remember yourself.
But it goes to what you just said about body and
Yeah.
and how you show up, that you have to be aware of how this shows up, because if it's not together, you can't move.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, like mic drops. Where I work is a place that has a history. I work in the State Fair of Texas, and the State Fair of Texas has a history of not always being on the right side of history. It was a place where Klan rallies had been held. The parking lots at one time used to be Black folks' homes, and it was through the city of Dallas that did eminent domain and took people's homes. And so there is a history around this place that has not always been very positive for Black folks. I must say, I am elated that I work with an administration, and I'm a part of it, that has said we have to do something different. But I know when I first started working here, there were Black folks who were going, how are you showing up knowing this history? And you choose to be a part of something like that, and showing up in these kinds of spaces. I think it is understanding the cultural context. I think that is critical to being able to do this. And for me, I could not take for granted that because I am a Black woman, I understand all the experiences of Black people. We are not monolithic. And so, although I can sympathize and in many situations empathize, it does not mean that I have the ability to tell the story for everyone. And so I have to show up in knowing that history and that cultural context, but I also have to be open to listening to the lived experiences of other people, and being aware of my place in that. And I'll end with this. It's so interesting when you talk about place. My dog amazes me. I have this little fat dog. And when she sees a space, she does like this and she looks at it to determine, will I fit? And it's the coolest thing to me, because humans don't necessarily do that. We just kind of show up in stuff, and if it doesn't fit, we'll bump into it and try to make it adjust to us. But she is so intentional with thinking, can I get my little caboose that's a little chunky? Can I get it through here? And I think there's a lesson in that for us as humans. Wow. You know, you keep growing because there is a commitment to you and your purpose. I think the first loyalty that anyone has is to themselves. And I don't think we realize how often we commit these acts of betrayal and treason against ourselves because of decisions that we allow other people to impose upon us. So the idea that someone wants you to shrink is someone trying to control you. And I don't think we pay attention to how oppression really impacts us. And so if someone is asking you to be less than who you are, not only is that impacting you from being the great person that you were designed to be, they are also being limited because they don't get to benefit from the fullness of who you are. And so to be in a system that would say it is okay for you to be less than, we need to be mad because people are being cheated. I
Mm.
am being cheated out of the cure to cancer because I don't want you to be your best person. I'm being cheated out of the cure to these allergies and somebody coming up with that because I don't want to invest in you going to school because I don't think you deserve it because I've othered you. That's problematic. And so, as you say that and ask that question, it is a disservice to us not to show up, and my word again, in the totality of who we are, because we deny ourselves from having the full experience of life, but we deny other people from being able to be themselves when we don't allow ourselves to be liberated. I love that Marian Ann Williamson quote about that, because when you shrink and you don't shine, then I'm in the dark, because maybe your light is the very thing that would help me be what I need to be.
One of the things that I know about myself and what I have to do in order to keep growing is to remember, well, two things. The first thing, racism, anti-Black racism, what Resma Menachem calls white body supremacy. It is opportunistic. It is
Yes,
everywhere. None of us probably would have imagined how a mask, a little paper mask, could become racialized in this world.
yes,
So I have to be aware of how opportunistic racism is, and that anywhere I go at any time, whether I'm expecting it or not, likely because I'm not expecting it, I'm going to be asked to shrink in some way. And then I have to catch myself when I'm shrinking. Because, one of the things I've told people about that I became aware of just a few months ago, I bought something and I didn't want a bag, but I was walking around holding it so everybody could see my receipt. And suddenly it occurred to me, oh, my body, my muscles are tight. I'm constricted. What am I doing? I'm walking around trying to look conspicuously honest, because I know that there is a world out there that is quick to stop me and ask me, question my integrity. So the first thing I have to do is to pay attention, be
yes.
intentional, because my mind may say one thing because, as I said, I have the words, but am I doing something in my body? Oftentimes, when we're asked to shrink, it's because people don't want to grow.
Yes.
And so, they think, while they may think that my shrinking is helping them and serving a purpose, our country is falling apart right now,
Completely.
right this moment. When we see in Florida, the we don't have to go to Florida, but why not? When we see in Florida, the governor has signed legislation, which means somebody produced the legislation and folks voted for it, that says that uh, organizations, I guess school systems, have to ask faculty and teachers to declare their political beliefs. He signed that into law. Now, what is he? Does he care? No. He's doing something about his own self-interest, and he figures that the best way to do that is identify these are people you should be afraid of, these are people you can hate, and I'm going to show you how we control. He doesn't even care if it gets wiped out in the Supreme Court, and it might not, given the Supreme Court we now have. He doesn't care about that. He wants it long enough to keep his power growing. And the way I think our country, how our country has operated. It's been operated for years by saying, let's find some folks who will keep in a barrel with a lid on it, keep them over there. And if you hate them, this is, what elite white bodies, as Resma would say, has, said to poor white bodies, if you hate them, you have status. You are somebody. So let's make sure these people shrink. So I have this sort of a dual thing of like being aware of what people think my shrinking will do for them, but knowing it's not going to, certainly is not serving me, won't serve them. And more than anything, I have to be aware of how am I entering? Who was it that wrote it? When and where I enter?
Yes.
You know, how am I entering?
Well, and the thing my mother would always say is if you dig a ditch for me, you better dig two.
Right.
Because you, as you are spending time trying to keep me in it, you need to make sure that you're there to watch me too. So as much as you try to hold me down and keep me back, you are limiting yourself because now you got to watch what I am doing and you don't get to fully do what you want to do.
Right.
It creates a noose for you. Just as you
Right.
are trying to restrict me, you are restricting yourself from really being able to experience the freedom. That is so much of America's problem is we are so short-sighted. We want to have the immediate gratification without recognizing that every generation gets handed more of this crap because we choose not to heal and we choose not to deal with it and own our mess.
Absolutely. And when you look at all of the furor around critical race theory by people who don't have any idea what it
What it
means,
means.
and then but what I'm struck by what you said, it's like how you can become enslaved to someone else's enslavement. And yeah, and I'm thinking about that other famous Texan, from somewhere south of Austin, who said many, many years ago, if you can convince the poorest white man that he is better than the richest Black man, he will never know you're picking his pocket. And
Mm-mm.
that's the piece that I'm hearing when you talk about how we get enslaved. And then of course, um Vic Mensa says we are slaves to each other's pain.
Yes.
And and to just have this young brother say that and put that in his music, is something that every now and then I have to listen to it. That also keeps me growing because I don't like any of the conversations about, oh, the false hope. Oh, the young people aren't going to do anything except what we show them.
Exactly. And I will say this, they are amazing because any movement that has been successful has been the result of young people. It is the innovation and the creativity that they bring to the table. And what does that look like when we partner with them and work
Right.
together with wisdom and allow them to lead? So much of the challenge I see in our community is, and it's all centered around power, this power over, but it is this ideal of I'm going to hold on to this as long as I
As
possibly
long as
can.
I possibly can.
And I gotta, I can't breathe, I can't see, I don't even know what day it is, but I'm gonna still hold on as tight without saying, let me groom and mentor you so you can avoid some of the pitfalls that I've had and accelerate your success even faster to helping our community. What we want to do is watch people just keep falling and falling and falling because it's some sick form of hazing. It's like we want people to struggle in the same ways. And it's like, what would it look like if we provided this bridge for folks that they can then walk into these places with this institutional knowledge and continue to move the work that's already been started? But
That's
some of
been
them have to
started.
start back at zero because we don't want to share and tell them. And these young people are amazing. I wish that we could look at people and see beyond their limitations and begin to start seeing the possibilities that people have for greatness. What that would look like for our society would
Mhm.
totally change our world if we could look beyond that. And some of that is because of our own wounding and the barriers and walls that we have up on ourselves. And then we transfer that to other people. So if we think we're limited, then we look at other people and go, you must be even more limited than I am. And it's
Right.
our way of feeling good about ourselves. How
Right.
sick. It's sick.
How sick is that? How sick is that? I mean, the fact that, the only way I can deal with my wound is to pass it on to you. And it happens everywhere. It
Yes.
happens throughout the society again. This isn't an either or thing. It is how we pass those wounds through the generations. And then we come up with some pablum thing like say, oh, young people give us hope, not when we're teaching them fear. And the other, I just have to riff for 30 seconds on something you said about the people who actually create social change. They are always people who've been told you don't have the power to create social change. Because the folks who have the power, why do they need change?
Right. Right.
So
And
just knowing that's.